Every now and then, legends are passed around so often that they indirectly become passed off as real history, mostly by uninformed parties. Stories that come to mind are the Soviet ape soldiers, tales of the Mayan end of days, or general conspiracy theories. These stories are obvious to be works of fiction, at least they are agreed to be by the general public. On the other hand, there are some legends that seem so laughably impossible that they are scoffed at and made fun of for years. They are often thrown around as campfire tales to scare the living daylights out of ourselves and our friends, even though they are real. Moreover, like I always say, all urban legends are based on a kernel of truth, and no other urban legend embodies that fact than the Virginia legend, the Clifton Bunnyman. In short, the Clifton Bunnyman, a demented figure with the appearance of a man-sized bunny, had allegedly terrorized the wooded Virginian countryside for years. The legend begins in 1904 in Clifton, Virginia. The tale of the Bunnyman started with a series of unsolved brutal murders that allegedly originated with an insane asylum that existed buried in the wilderness of Clifton, Virginia in the early 1900s. According to the legend, the new townsfolk of Clifton didn't take too kindly to the idea of having an asylum near their town and families. As such, the town successfully gathered enough signatures in a petition to get the asylum removed, and moved the patients of the asylum elsewhere. A nearby institution aided the citizens of Clifton by accepting the patients of the asylum to take residence at their institution. So a week after the petition had been approved, and the mayor approved the transfer, the patients began being loaded into a transport bus. Everyone came aboard the transport bus, and all seemed to have been going well. That was until two patients began to cause some commotion. The two patients were apparently arguing for no reason at all, whereas other versions of the story claimed the patients were arguing over a loaf of imaginary bread. Regardless, one of the security personnel on the bus tried to stop the infighting between the two, and as he turned back and told the bus driver to stop the bus, one of them clamped their teeth onto his neck, yanking a piece right off. The patient grabbed the gun off the security guard and then continued to take aim at the bus driver and fire. At that moment, the bus began to swirl and it crashed into a ditch, killing several of the patients and allowing the rest to escape. When news of the crash reached the local police station, they sprang into action and went into the woods to find the missing patients, where all but one of the escapees were rounded up. They searched for this missing patient for days, weeks, and months, but to no avail. Most assumed that the patient dropped dead somewhere along the woods. Others assumed that the patient crossed the border and made his way over to Mexico. However, that didn't seem to be the case. Since his disappearance, skinned, half-eaten rabbit carcasses left hanging from trees and the Colchester overpass began to appear soon after. Many of the locals then came to the conclusion that it had to be the escapee, since no living creature could maim or kill animals with such precision. It was only soon after that people started disappearing near the woods. Children, teens, adults, seniors, they all began to vanish. Clifton soon set out a warning that people should avoid the outskirts of the woods, especially at night, when most people began to disappear. After that, officials found the body of one Marcus Walser, a former citizen of Clifton, visiting his grandmother. To their horror, he had been carved, leaving a big gaping hole in his stomach. Most horrific, Walser seemed to be hanging by his own intestines. Disturbingly enough, alongside the passageway of the bridge was where Walser was hanged, similar to the rabbits found earlier in the woods. Understandably concerned, the police ramped up their efforts to find the madman, and soon discovered that the culprit was none other than Douglas A. Griffin, who had been put in the asylum for killing his family on Easter Sunday. When encountered by the police, Griffin made a run for it. He tried to escape the police and ran as fast as he could. When cornered, he had no other choice but to go through the rail tracks. And he would have almost made it too. Unfortunately for Griffin, as he was running, his pants got caught on a loose nail on the track. The police went to go help him, but then they heard something in the distance. The police heard the sound of an incoming train. They kept tugging at his pants, but Griffin just kept kicking them so that he could try to escape. Ultimately, the police were forced to jump off the rail, and Griffin was killed, decapitated by the incoming train. Since then, it is widely believed that Griffin's spirit haunts the place, seeking not so much vengeance, but just someone new to kill. According to the legend, should anyone visit the bridge on Halloween night, then they too will meet a grisly fate. He murders any curious teens who come take a gander at his beloved bridge. Anyone who dare call his name will meet face to face with the Bunnyman, only to soon discover that it is too late to escape. If the Bunnyman catches you, then you too will be dangling from the bridge, just like Marcus Walser. To this day, many people swear on their lives that they saw the Bunnyman, and even write about their encounter. One user on Reddit, Truth by Fire, shares his experience. Summers come, and not wanting to repeat the experiences of last summer, I decided to go on a road trip with my friends to the East Coast. We got started early, and we've already made it to Virginia. I've got a lot of stories, of course, but a few of them are like this. One of the places that my friends wanted to explore when we first got to Fairfax County, Virginia, was called the Bunnyman Bridge. Long story short, around this area in the early 1900s, there was a lunatic who escaped from an asylum dressed in a bunny costume. He hung out there and killed a lot of people. Supposedly, he was run over by a train while running from the police. On Halloween night, his ghost comes out of the overpass where he was killed and slaughters anyone stupid enough to be there. Being me, I said no, but the larger group was persistent, college age, and attracted to nothing so much as a scary story. My one friend, Jim, argued that it wasn't even Halloween, and that we wouldn't be going at night. But the other two members of our group, Robert and Clark, said screw that. According to them, if we didn't go at night, it wasn't worth going. So there I found myself at the Colchester Overpass, near the middle of the night. Honestly, I can see how ghost stories formed of this place. It's creepy as hell, like just about all East Coast forests at night. There's something about those trees, the way their larger branches droop over the smaller ones, and the smaller ones form spindly webs that just barely obscure everything behind them. That'd be bad enough if the overpass tunnel didn't look like some kind of gateway to hell. It's short, but there are no lights, and the opposite entrance looks like a tiny black hole. I remember Clark bemoaning how it wasn't Halloween, and Jim shooting back that his place was probably packed at the time. I argued, if it's packed at Halloween when this guy is supposedly around and no one sees anything, don't you think the odds of running into a psycho bunny ghost are slim? To which someone said, slim, but not impossible. Meanwhile, Robert knew all the stories, and he told them to us as we waited. They varied a lot. Sometimes they featured kidnapped children, oftentimes they referred to the Bunnyman's past as an escaped asylum inmate who murdered his wife and children on Easter Sunday. But they all had the same basic idea, that being an axe-wielding bunny aficionado. Still, even I started to get into it by the fifth story. Though by then it was almost midnight. Still wish we could come at Halloween, I remember Clark grumbling. That was when my watch hit midnight and stopped. I examined it carefully. The second hand wasn't moving. I looked over at everyone else and explained what happened. Looks like your watch broke, dude, Jim said, and they all shrugged it off. I frowned and looked up into the tunnel. In the pitch black darkness, I thought I saw the faintest trace of motion. I looked harder and furrowed my brow. But just like that, the motion stopped. Everything was still. Then the wind picked up, and some of the tree branches blew harshly. It was then that I noticed that not only branches were moving, but objects hanging from them. There were nooses in all the trees around us, dozens of them, and at the end of them, hanging by their necks, were mutilated bunny corpses. Some were missing a leg, or an ear, others most of their body. They'd all been meticulously strung up, and they swayed back and forth in those awful trees, with their light webs and their drooping branches. I then noticed a clack sound for the first time, coming from inside the tunnel. It was loud enough that we could hear it through the closed car window. It echoed out from the tunnel, and I could see more motion. Everyone else was still staring at the rabbit bodies, bewildered. They hadn't been there when we arrived, and I will swear that on my life. Anyhow, with my past experiences, I was used to getting over one shock, and being ready for the next. I heard another clack sound, and I couldn't ignore it. Guys, I said, there's something in the tunnel. Robert, who was driving, looked back at me, then at the overpass. His eyes widened as he saw the motion too. Whatever it was coming closer. We watched in silence as it finally left the tunnel, and it kept moving closer. Then, Robert turned on the lights. What I first noticed was not the figure in the front of the tunnel. It was what we hadn't noticed in the trees. Closer to the trunks, formerly hidden from us by the dark branches, there were not just bunnies, but human corpses, mutilated in just the same way. They were all of varying age, race, and sex, but they all dangled from nooses, and they all wore blood-stained bunny costumes that were floppy and empty in the places where the limbs were missing. And then I saw it. Then I saw the Bunnyman. I couldn't make out anything more than just a silhouette. A man in a bunny costume standing there, silently holding a hatchet. As we watched in terror, something dripped from its blade. He moved his hand higher up the weapon's haft, and then calmly started walking towards us. Robert, in a panic, turned the key in the ignition and floored it. We accelerated forward straight towards the Bunnyman. He reached out with his empty hand as we came closer, and then hit my window with his hatchet. It shattered, and for a moment I heard him muttering, "My property. Mine. My damn property." But we were gone. I looked back once and saw him standing there, watching us as we drove through the tunnel. We didn't slow down until we were out of Fairfax County. I looked at my watch sometime later and saw that the second hand was working again. and it was still fairly synchronized with everyone else's time. Yesterday, we checked out the broken window, completely shattered, but no evidence that a hatchet hit it. We've agreed that there doesn't need to be. Everyone we know will get the story that someone tried to break into our car. Still, I figured this is as good a place as any to spread the word. Don't go to the Bunnyman Bridge late at night, or any night, particularly on Halloween. It's a bad place, and I've been to some bad places. But what truly terrified me wasn't the bridge itself. It was when I got back to the hotel room and looked outside my window. Standing in the glow of one of the streetlights, holding his hatchet and waving with his free hand, was the silhouette of the Bunnyman. I did a double take, and there was nothing there. Probably lack of sleep getting to me, but I knew right then that I wasn't going to be making up for it tonight. No one is truly sure whether or not the story is real, but what is true is that there really was a crazy guy dressed in a bunny suit terrorizing, or actually more like confusing the hell out of people in the Fairfax County. 2 separate incidents from 1970 report a man dressed in a bunny suit yelling at people he felt were trespassing on his property. In one incident, he tossed a hatchet through a car window, and the other he attempted to chop down a porch post with a long-handled axe, says an article on Oddly Historical. Soon after the events in 1970, the story really took off, and it became a local legend. A legend that soon spread across the country, and is one of the most well-known stories today. The legend eventually spawned several movies, most notably in the film Donnie Darko, and even made its way into literature as a horror icon. Well, to conclude, this urban legend is very strange, and in fact, looking into the origin more, it just becomes weirder. So in this case, I guess you can say the truth was stranger than fiction. Oh wait, wrong series. Well, let me leave you with this little factoid. The legend of the Bunnyman even spawned a folk song titled Bunnyman.